I'm Ted McFall from McFall Bee Yard. Today I'm going to show you how to do an alcohol wash. Now, there's different ways of checking your Varroa mite load. Checking your Varroa mite load is one of the most important things that you can do as a beekeeper, since mites will wipe out your bees. It happens all the time. A lot of new beekeepers, they experience colony loss and they don't know what happened. Most of the time it's due to Varroa mite. So there's a lot of people out there that are treatment free. They don't think you should treat your Varroa mite load in any way, and that's fine. You know, I respect those people. However, I think that it's not a bad idea to treat your Varroa mite load, but just remember, whenever you're creating queens and propagating certain lines, to try to propagate the lines that are more Varroa resistant. So in that way, it can help honeybees in the long run. So the Varroa mite, it came from China. Wonderful little gift from China. Unfortunately, it's an invasive species. It came in the early 90s to the United States, and it's been tearing up bee colonies ever since then. There's different ways of trying to monitor your mite load. One way is just by looking at the bees. That is not a very good way, because about 85% of Varroa mites are actually on the underside of bees. And so whenever you find one on the top of a bee, that's only about 15% of them are on the top area. And so and actually research has shown that those 15% that are on top of the bees, those are the Varroa mite that are getting ready to swap horses and jump onto another bee. From there, they're getting ready to get off of that bee and go to another bee. And so that way is not good at all. That is not any type of accurate way in any way of determining how many mites you have. Another way is by tearing up your drone brood and trying to see if you see any Varroa mites under the capping of drone broods. That's not a very good way either, but that would give you some idea. Some people will also use a mite drop to check that. They'll put either lard or Crisco or Vaseline or something on the bottom board of a screen bottom board to try to see how many mites will drop through. That's not so great either. Even if you do a force mite drop, where you throw powdered sugar inside a hive and try to get the mites to fall off more naturally, even that's pretty inaccurate. You know, only about 30% or so of the mites that are on the bees will fall off, even if you dump lots of powdered sugar inside a hive. So that's not a wonderful way either. And actually, there's also an old school way of checking mite load, and that's with an ether roll, where they basically will take a jar, they will spray starting fluid from an engine inside a jar, and it stuns the bees. Most of the time it doesn't kill them. If you spray enough, it will kill them, but usually it just stuns them. And then you shake it around, and the bees will vomit up the honey that's in their honey crop, and it will make the inside of the jar sticky, and so the mites will actually stick to the outside of the jar. So you just count the bees that are stuck to the inside of the jar, or you count the Varroa mite that are stuck to the inside of the jar. But not too many people do that anymore. Some of the old timers still do, but it's still pretty rare. A more popular one these days tends to be the sugar roll, where you take powdered sugar and you put it in a jar and you shake it up with the bees, and the Varroa mite often let go, and then you count the Varroa mite that way. That is not the most accurate way. So that's not a way that I encourage people to do it. The gold standard is definitely using alcohol, rubbing alcohol. And it does kill the bees. You are going to kill about 300 bees every time you do a check, but you have to remember that you have to see an entire colony as an organism. You can't just consider an individual bee as one little personality. That entire colony is an organism, and if those bees understood that you were doing a mite check to save that colony, they would happily volunteer to jump in that jar and die. So you're doing this for the better good of the colony. You know, no one takes any pleasure out of killing your bees. You do anything to keep your bees alive, but in this case you have to, if you want your colony to survive. So I'm going to show you two different ways of doing the mite wash. One way is by using this, it's called a Varroa Easy Check. These are a little bit pricey. I think they're about 25 bucks, maybe 30 bucks, I'm not sure. But they're a little bit on the pricey side for just plastic, but they're pretty cleverly made. You have the lid, there's a plastic insert inside the plastic insert, you'll see there's a couple lines at the bottom, on the side here towards the bottom. The top one, you'll fill it, the bees, all the way up to the top one if you want 300 bees. If you want 200 bees, you fill it up to the bottom line. I recommend you fill it up to the top line so you get 300 bees in there. And if you can see, there's like all these little holes in it. The holes are basically kind of angled to one direction, and that's actually a pretty cleverly designed way that you swirl it in that direction, and the holes are made angled that way, so the bees, the Varroa mite will just slide right on out and fall right down. And that's that brings me to another important thing that I need to mention, is the fact that I could give you the same hive and the same easy check as I do, and you could have a totally different Varroa mite load count than what I would have. And that's due to two things. One is what type of bees you're getting. If you get just foragers that are generally like on the upper lid and the outer honey frames and things like that, well, their mite load is going to be much lower than the nurse bees that are on the brood. So if you're measuring just brood bees, it might be abnormally high. The mite load might be. And if you do just the foragers on the outside, then you might mistakenly think you don't have much of a problem when you really do. So they've shown that the most ideal frame to check would be the frame that is just adjacent or right beside the brood. So you find like where the brood is. In general, it's kind of a circular kind of a brood thing inside a hive, and right where it ends, the next one over, grab that one and shake that one to get the bees off of that one, and measure that one, because that one's going to give you the most accurate determination of what's in the hive. Now, let's say you get 6 Varroa mites. So what you do is you swirl it around. You don't shake it this way. If you shake it up and down, then the mites are going up and down with the bees, and you want the mites to go down. So what you do is you simply swirl it, and the mites will come out and then find their way down and settle down. Now, all alcohol is not created equal. When it comes to rubbing alcohol, if you go to Walgreens or Rite Aid or any other store and try to get alcohol, there's going to be 3 different types of isopropyl alcohol. There's going to be 50%, 70%, 90%, and 99%. The higher the alcohol, the better. So if you can find 99%, get that. If you can only get 90%, get that. This one is 90%, but the higher that you can get, the better. And that's because if I did a mite wash with 50%, in order for me to get all the mites off of those bees, I would have to do 5 1-minute mite washes to get them all down, as opposed to 1 if you have 90%. So it's a huge difference about being able to get all the mites off with the amount of alcohol in there. So the cheapest one in the store is going to be the 50% one. Unfortunately, the higher the isopropyl alcohol, the higher the price, but get the more expensive one to get the more accurate read. And so those are the 2 things that can throw off your count, is by using a different percentage of alcohol and using a different sort of a bee in your hive. So those are 2 things you need to be aware of. Now, if you don't want to invest in one of these, which are a little bit on the pricey side, you can make your own mite wash sort of container. You just take a regular jar with the lid, and you're going to need to get number 8 hardware cloth. And you can take your jar and you put it on the top. You take a marker, you make a circle on your hardware cloth, you cut out the circle, and then you wind up with something like this. And then you simply take that and you stuff it into the lid as best you can. You don't have to stick it in very well. And then you just screw it on. And after you screw it on, it mashes it in there well. So now this is your lid. And you're just going to fill this up with 2 fingers worth of bees and pour the alcohol on top of them, which will kill them. Well, actually, you fill it 2 fingers full of bees. You cover it. You pour the alcohol on the bees, which will kill the bees. And then you shake it out. Well, that's after you swirl it. You swirl it for at least a good minute, maybe a minute and a half, and then you shake it out. And you'll shake it out onto something white, or something like a lid is what a lot of people do, and then you can count the Varroa mite that way. And of course, this is a cheap, easy way of doing it. Probably this is a little bit more accurate and a little bit easier, so I recommend going and investing in one of those. But if not, you can do it this way too. I'm going to demonstrate how to do it both ways. So I'm gonna go get some bees over there. I tell you what, I might need to stop the video so I can get the smoker going, because I don't want the bees to get too upset at me. You know, I try to make this as calm and peaceful as I can. I don't like disrupting my bees for no reason that I don't have to. So I'm gonna go and stop the video here for a moment just to get the smoker going. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shake the bees into this tupper, and I need a half a cup of them. A half a cup is about 300 bees. Some people say it's actually closer to 315 bees. But so I'm gonna shake bees in here, the ones that's adjacent to the brood, and then I'm gonna scoop it out from there, and I'm gonna put it inside my little check jar. So let me open this one up real quick. It's not gonna be on this one. So I can see find where my brood is. Yeah, so this one. And this one is the best one because this one has a lot of brood on it, so I know this is the ideal one to check. So I'll come back for this one in just a second. I'm gonna get my thing ready. I'm gonna get my cup ready. And you just give it a quick snap. Most of the foragers are flying off. You just take them, you take the bees, you shake it down into a little corner of your tupper. You take a nice scoop, full scoop, throw it in there, and you cover it up. And that was 300 bees. That was a full scoop there. And if I want to do a second one, I'll go and check the same one just because. And then get them off my little thing there. And then you put them in here and you close it up. And that's it. I'm gonna put it all back together. I have all these lost little bees. I'm gonna let them come back home here. There you go. And so I'll just leave that. And we'll go check out what our mite load is. So we got the bees we needed. These are my sweet bees. Like I said, I hate killing my bees because I love my bees, but I have to know what kind of mite load they're at. This is the 300 bees, and you have to give them enough alcohol that'll at least cover the surface of the bees. The alcohol is a quick death, so at least they're not suffering. It's a quick and painless death. And so you're gonna swirl that for at least a minute. Probably a minute and a half is better. And of course, the higher the alcohol content, the better. So I'm gonna swirl that for a good minute and a half. And also I'm gonna swirl this one for a minute and a half too. So I'm gonna be swirling them both. Actually, I need to do this one clockwise, like I said, because of the little circles. And this is harder than I thought. You know, it's not often that I do a demonstration doing these at the same time. It's kind of like patting your head and patting your belly at the same time or something like that. Anyway, I'm gonna do this for about the next minute and a half, and I'll be right back. One more thing that I wanted to mention was 50% alcohol versus 90% alcohol. The mites will drop much faster in 90% alcohol. They drop twice as fast in 90% isopropyl alcohol than in 50% isopropyl alcohol, and so you want the mites to drop. So actually, that's yet another reason to get the higher amount of alcohol whenever you do this. All right, so what I'm going to do here, you can come get a closer look here. I'm going to basically shake this into a lid. You can shake it in anything, a lighter color the better, and then I'm going to see what comes out of it. So here I go. I'm going to do it upside. I'm going to shake it here. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And so that's all my dead bees there, 300 dead bees. And then I look at the lid, and I try to look for anything that looks like Varroa mite. And I do not see one Varroa mite. So, I mean, that's what you want to see as a beekeeper, is no Varroa mite. That's ideal right there. But what you're looking for is the reddish, brownish, little circular Varroa mite. But this is actually, looks like it's going to be a very clean colony. That's what I want. That brings a smile to a beekeeper's face, I'll tell you that. And so we have the easy check. And this one's been swirled too. So I'm going to have a look under here. And I do not see, you just look at the bottom, and I do not see one Varroa mite. You see like a little debris down there, a little dirt and stuff, but there is not one Varroa mite in there. So, lucky for us, the Varroa mite count is super low right now. It's non-existent in that hive. It's 0. And that's what we want. We're not just going to check the one hive though. We're going to go through and check several hives. You can't just put all your stock into one hive thinking, oh yeah, you know, I know the whole bee yard's good now. No, you better check several to make sure that it's good. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to check several, but that's what we want. And at the end of the day, if you can keep your mite load below 2% year round, that's ideal. So if you can keep it below 6. So if I find 6 on here, that means we're starting to get into the problem area. Some beekeepers will say 3%, which would be 9, because whatever you see here, you have to divide it by 3. So if you see 6, divide it by 3, and it's going to be 2%. 2% is okay, but you better get it down, in my opinion, under 2%. Depending on the time of year, in let's say June, if you find 3 Varroa mite in June, you're going to have a problem. That Varroa is going to go up. In the early spring, you better have 0 or 1, and that's it. If you find more than 1 in the early spring, you might have trouble. And because the later in the summer, the Varroa mite count goes up, and that's when they get all your bees sick. So around like August, you better make sure you have clean bees, because those are the ones that are going to start emerging, and those are the bees that are going to have to make it through wintertime. Whenever they start, you know, August, September, October, November, you know, those later months in the year, you need those bees to be super healthy so that they're not carrying viruses and can survive the winter for you. Because unfortunately, the majority of beekeepers that say, oh, I had bees, but they died. They died in the winter. Oh, maybe they starved. It's possible they starved. If they still have honey, it's less likely. But you have to You have to understand that a lot of new beekeepers don't really see the problem of their bees because the bees are sick, but new beekeepers don't really realize they're sick. And so one of the things you could do is, if you have a dead out, a lot of times you can look inside your comb, like at the bottom part of the comb, and look for something called guanine. Guanine is like the little poop. It's like tiny little white specks, like on the bottom of of the cell. Like not the so if you have a frame and you put it on its side, it's going to be like towards the edge, like, you know, because the poop will follow gravity of the mite. And so that's like one little clue that you had a high mite infestation after you have a dead out. But one of the most important things you can do is controlling your mites. Like I mentioned earlier, I do respect and I understand the people that are treatment free and say don't treat your bees. I myself am an organic type of beekeeper. I don't want to put anything in my hive that's any type of a pesticide, even if it's a low dose pesticide or anything like that. I like to do things as naturally as possible, but I also understand that I'm going to have a lot of dead bees if I don't do something about the Varroa mites. And so this is proof that my system of making queens and making colonies more Varroa resistant is working, because I will purposefully decide, okay, which hive am I going to make a queen from? I can, you know, I want the ones that produce honey. I want the ones that are gentle. I want the ones that build up quickly in the spring. And one of the things I also look for is the ones that are Varroa resistant. If I have one hive that consistently has 0 or 1 mite, and all the other ones have higher loads, 4 or 5 mites, then I know, you know what, that one is, those bees don't tolerate many of those mites. They like to fight those mites. And so knowing your mite count is very important. And I hope this video was helpful to you. Ted McFall from McFall Bee Yard.